High School, one virtual visit in our series of virtual visits with our first 5 demonstration sites from across Washington state. At the Herring Center for Inclusive Education at the University of Washington, we are thrilled to be partnering with OSPI and some exemplary schools, one of which is here to share their journey with you today. We would like to introduce you to our Herring Center team. Here today is Herring Center Director Eileen Schwartz, Inclusion Specialists Rena Marie Leon Guerrero, and Katie Bateman, who will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat. I'm Cassie Martin, and I'll be leading us through the webinar today. Our program coordinator, Molly Lyman, is also here. She will make sure you have everything you need in case you experience any technical issues. Before we dive in, let's make sure we're set up for the webinar. As we get started, please test your audio at the bottom left-hand corner of the menu. Thank you for sharing your comments and ideas in the chat. Because of the number of people participating today, we will not be answering questions or responding via the chat. If you'd like our presenters to answer a question, please use the Q&A feature instead. We will be recording today's webinar and it will be provided on the Herring Center's demonstration site's webpage. The recording from today will be available by the end of this month. As we go through the webinar, please keep this webinar etiquette in mind. We encourage a growth mindset where you are open to thinking about new ideas and willing to push yourselves to grow. Thank you for joining us today, for being present, positive, and engaged. In our Zoom invite, we sent you an impact form that included some pre-webinar planning. Please have your impact forms available to reference during today's presentation, and consider sharing what you wrote as you ask questions and participate. You will notice the second page is a place to document ideas you can take back to your school team, share with colleagues, and with families. We hope you will utilize this tool to support your learning. This is what the impact form looks like. The front page, and then the takeaways on the back page. All right, let's practice the chat. Using your impact form, please share what impact you hope today's webinar will have on your school's inclusionary practices. We will be able to reference this information later, and it will be useful for us in future planning. A friendly reminder that if you have questions, we'll be doing our best to monitor and respond in the Q&A in the bottom of your screens. But right now, let's go to the chat. What impact do you hope the webinar will have today? Great. All right. To start, here's a little background information about the Demonstration Sites project. In the fall of 2019, OSPI launched the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project. The Herring Center partnered with OSPI to coordinate and lead this part of the larger statewide project, creating model demonstration sites that highlight inclusionary practices across Washington state. The Demonstration Sites project was developed to provide educators from around the state with the opportunity to observe inclusionary practices in action, meet with school teams, collect artifacts that aid in systems change, and learn about how to implement inclusionary practices in different school contexts. Over the course of 2 years, 16 model demonstration sites across all 9 ESD regions will provide professional development to visiting schools. Our demonstration sites highlight the diversity in our state. They include urban schools, rural schools, and schools in some of our largest and smallest districts across Washington. In collaboration with the Herring Center Inclusion Specialists, demonstration sites host visiting schools to showcase high-leverage inclusionary practices. By sharing these practices and opening their doors to teachers, administrators, families, and community members, it allows visitors to see best practices in action and apply them in their schools. At the same time, the demonstration sites themselves continue to grow their inclusive cultures and refine their practices that contribute to equitable learning for all students. There are some founding principles that drive our model demonstration sites work. To start, in every school, there are things that are working well. In education, we have the tendency to examine the problems associated with our practices. Instead of examining what's working well, why it's working well, and how we can use that information to make things better. This asset-based approach is a productive way for schools to leverage their strengths and become more inclusive. Also, inclusion is not a special education initiative, but it's a cultural initiative. If we simply change the way we deliver special education services without considering the culture of the school or how all students engage in teaching and learning, we will never make the changes we need to truly impact student learning. Through the course of our webinars, you will hear from demonstration sites that are doing extraordinary things. What's exciting about these schools are that whether they're in year 1 of their journey or if they're 6 years in, they all have plans for continuous improvement. They recognize that as new students enter their buildings and as they collect more information about the best ways students learn, that their professional practices need to reflect that learning. Demonstration sites also know that engaging stakeholders in the reform process is a critical component to making and sustaining changes. When stakeholders are involved, there's a higher likelihood the schools will adopt and implement inclusive practices. Our demonstration sites showcase close partnerships between school leaders and teachers, engaging in true distributive leadership, learning, making decisions, and moving forward collaboratively. We know that there are systems in place in some districts and not in others. However, learning how demonstration sites have implemented high leverage moves can have wide-reaching benefits. You will notice the demonstration site's principal and today also the associate principal are involved in the webinar today. We just mentioned the importance of distributive leadership and stakeholder engagement, but would be remiss if we did not mention the importance of innovative site-based leadership to support this work. Our goals for the demonstration sites project are both simple and complex. We want to make sure that when school personnel or teams visit demonstration sites, or in this case, hear about their journeys, that it provides a transformational learning experience. To do this, we are studying and implementing best practices in model demonstration site replication to ensure that our visitors or participants have an experience where they are inspired and leave with ideas for implementation in their schools. We also want to create a peer learning communities between demonstration sites that build professional networks in our state. Through this project, we aren't only impacting visiting schools, but are working with demonstration sites to continue to evolve and change as they learn more about their students and best practices, or as their school culture continues to change. Because one of our founding principles is that inclusion is a cultural initiative, demonstration sites show that when we put best practices in place for students with disabilities, and consider how we can implement these practices in general education contexts and in content, it improves outcomes for all students in our schools. We already talked about taking an asset-based approach and creating a culture of collaboration across Washington State schools. An important goal for this project is to improve the social and academic outcomes for students with and without disabilities, and to show that when we do things that are better for students, it's typically better for adults too. At the end of our webinar, we want you to leave with some key takeaways that you can bring with you back to your school team. This will include information, tools and supports you can use to build, implement, and sustain an inclusive school. We know this isn't exactly the same as being able to see these schools and classrooms in action, but are thrilled you are joining us today as we share some exemplary inclusionary practices and take you on one school's journey. First, we'll start for some polling. Tell us in the chat and in the poll, who's here today? Looks like we have teachers, parents, specialists, district personnel, administrators. This is great. We're so happy all of you are here joining us today. So now I'm going to hand it over to Program Coordinator Todd Karnowski, who's going to introduce the rest of the Evergreen High School team.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Todd Karnowski. I'm a program coordinator for Evergreen Public Schools. I joined Evergreen High School as a teacher in fall of 2010 and spent 2 years there before as a special ed teacher before moving to district as a behavior coach and then eventually a program coordinator.
Hi everyone, I'm Mandy Ovala. I am a teacher, learning support teacher at Evergreen High School. I've been teaching about 8 years. Majority of my teaching career has been inclusive practices in all aspects from elementary up to the high school area. So I love it.
And my name is Anna Capacci. I'm currently the special ed department coordinator at Evergreen High School. And I've worked at Evergreen since 2011 when I was hired as a learning support teacher. And I actually have a dual certification in English and special ed. So I came in with this goal towards inclusion. So I've done a lot of co-teaching in English, science, and math. And this is my first year now as the department coordinator.
Wooster. This is my first year as associate principal at Evergreen High School. Before that, my career journey, I was for 3 years, I was a paraeducator in a life skills classroom. And then as a teacher, I co-taught for a couple of years and met one of my best friends, and it was amazing. And then I was an instructional coach and now an administrator.
Hi everyone, my name is Danny Orantia. I actually started my career as a band and orchestra teacher, then went into school administration in 2014, and I'm currently in my second year as the principal at Evergreen High School.
Great, thank you. All right.
All right, so we're just going to jump in. So again, we're Evergreen High School from Vancouver, Washington. We're in the Evergreen School District, and we have 4 comprehensive high schools. We're one of those. We have about 1,600 students in our building. 12% of those students are on have IEP services. We have 200 staff members. 58% free reduced rate and about an 87% graduation rate. You will see in the next slide that our graduation rate has been steadily increasing over the past 4 years. And today, as we talk about our journey, we'll go through our journey first and some background context. And then we're going to talk about flexible teaching models, how we envision the role of the special education teacher, and creating a culture of shared ownership. One thing that's important that you will hear echoed throughout today's webinar is everything is interconnected. So you're going to hear us, when we talk about flexible teaching models, we'll talk about the gateway block, but then that will come up in other areas. So just be looking for that. Okay, so to begin our journey, our superintendent several years ago, like 7 years ago, gave us a big, hairy, audacious goal, which is like a BHAG, of 100% graduation rate. That has since transformed into really a focus on equity and access within the entire district, with graduation rate as an indicator of that. But where our journey started and why we started focusing on inclusionary practices was because of this BHAG. In addition, there is a substantial passion at Evergreen High School. The right people are on the bus and they are in the right spots. And we continuously move that and make tweaks. And you'll hear that in this presentation as well. And then access. We just want to make sure that all our students have access to core instruction.
Todd, you got to unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry. All right, so before we go into the Evergreen High School more with what Evergreen High School is doing. I wanted to take you through a journey of how Evergreen Public Schools set up precedents of using evidence-based practices, and then how that led to Evergreen High School in particular being innovative in using those practices to support all students. So one thing that happened was a change in the course catalog. And so what happened is in the course catalog, there were fewer supplanted classes. So classes that were delivered in a special ed setting. And so students had nowhere else to go but to enroll in general education classes, such as English 9 or math or Algebra 1. And during this time, the district was taking information from a variety of stakeholders from our community and using that information in order to create what wound up being our strategic plan at the time. And that's really around all students receiving special education services are general education students. They're receiving collaborative instruction in their least restricted environment. They have opportunities for specific, especially design instruction to close the achievement gap. And that's part of each school's plan. And that the teams receive collaborative professional development, which you'll see a lot of today, and then develop and demonstrate practices that embrace diversity. So even going back to how it changed from the BHAG of 100% graduation to equity and access. So one of the things that launched the strategic plan was videos about co-teaching and what that could look like. And so staff was shown these videos in order to kind of wrap their heads around what it meant to take on this new direction. And from there, Evergreen High School, as well as our other high schools and middle schools, launched into special education teachers becoming co-teachers, working in tandem with general education teachers throughout the day. I myself had an opportunity to co-teach freshman English, and I really enjoyed that year. That was just a lot of fun to be able to work in partnership with a gen ed teacher. And some of the training that we did was also impacting the IEPs, was making sure that IEP goals were standard based. And so staff had a lot of training around how to break down those standards and make sure that the skills were in alignment with the grade level standards, whether students were working towards those standards or actually working on parts of them. So from there, we use book studies in order to increase access for all. In fact, Anna facilitated part of our teaching in tandem professional development, where we had a group of co-teachers meet on a monthly basis, and we read different chapters of this book, Teaching in Tandem, and really kind of wrapped our heads around what it meant to be a co-teacher. What the special education administration did is that we met with every building and talked about how the strategic plan was also put in action with their building's plan. As part of that, we also provided co-teaching instructional rounds, so that way our co-teachers could go around the district and see the different practices that were in place and talk about them, and really try to move into these different types of co-teaching, as you see in the picture here. In fact, I still remember the day where we visited Mandy at Mill Plain Elementary at the time, and she really had a phenomenal way to demonstrate co-teaching even at the elementary level, and that was just an awesome experience. From there, we were able to build 4 pillars of co-teaching in Evergreen, and have since used this practice to show that there is a continuum of co-teaching practices, and really trying to work towards the more impactful version, where teachers are also co-planning together during the day as well. And the district also worked on providing 20 hours of release time so that teachers could really learn or have additional planning time with their co-teachers. So that was also a nice support to for teachers to continue to work towards wrapping their heads and around this and identifying those roles. We also worked on a continuum of services as well, and that was helpful in seeing what does services look like across the spectrum for all students. And then some of the other things that the district did is we put together a plan to look at how from preschool to age 21, everybody could look at engaging students beyond high school. And so in understanding the transition plan process, and that it's really driven by the student, and it takes a team's effort across years in order to make that happen. We also understand that there's a variety of tools that also help with providing that transition planning and keeping it seamless as the student ages. And teachers were trained on those tools as well. There was a focus on applied behavior analysis in our district that supported the behavioral lens. We added 3 board certified BCBAs and 17 registered behavior techs in order to support both school buildings and individual students across the district, using school-based plans to not just consult with buildings and provide training around like the AFLs and ABLES assessment, but also to work directly with students and probe interventions. And a big thing for us in this district is for the last couple of years, we've moved from this idea of controlling student behavior to providing comfort, using that trauma-informed approach and understanding how trauma impacts the brain. We use CPI and UKIRU in order to train our staff around those methods in order for them to think about creating environments for students to utilize their coping strategies and help meet students where they're at. A big innovation that happened starting at Evergreen High School was an academic resource center. And it was based off a college tutoring model where it was breaking down silos of having a teacher in their classroom with their paraeducator. And what it did is it brought everybody together through a center. And so that allowed, at first it was about integrated support classes, which was driven by a special ed teacher providing instruction to students with IEPs. And from there, it broadened to all students in the school being able to access the center for a variety of things. They centralized all the paraeducators through this center in order to look at the master schedule and daily needs across all classrooms, and then disperse staff in order to support students based on those daily needs. And it was really an incredible impact for all. And from there, a lot of school visits occurred where different districts and people from around the state and other states came to visit and see how those academic centers were really creating access for all and meeting students where they needed it, whether they needed an alternative space to take a test or needed a student to help them with their math that they were working on, because there were student tutors in the academic centers as well. There was a lot of, by centralizing the paraeducators, there was a paraeducator training that occurred to keep everybody in line with those school-based plans around behaviors or academic needs. Just a lot of really neat things that occurred through that. From there, some folks were asked to present at different conferences, sharing that vision of the academic resource centers and how that helps support student access. And then as far as the district goes, we we're able to then use that as an example to continue to broadcast other quality practices that were occurring throughout the district so that other folks can see different things such as a coffee cart or inclusive PE and whatnot. And we continue to do that now with different blog articles and podcasts so that staff can share their journey or their ideas around innovative practices that are occurring.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in a little bit and talk about, this is Anna, the special ed coordinator at Evergreen High School. I'm going to talk a little bit about our journey kind of as we've experienced it as a school team. So like I said, I got hired in 2011, and I remember when I first was like in the interview, they were talking about Evergreen was trying to do co-teaching. They were trying to include students. And the way that Jay Buno, who is currently our Director of Special Ed Services, described it to me is tearing off the Band-Aid. Like, we just kind of jumped in. And I know a lot of districts have that question, like, where do we start with inclusion? What does that look like? How do we get students going? And from our perspective at Evergreen, we just kind of just did it. So taking away the special ed English classes and the special ed math classes and having students included in typical classes throughout the building. So what that looked like from a teacher's perspective is all special ed teachers were co-teaching. So we focused especially on English and math at all different grade levels, just to make sure that we were providing especially design instruction in those main content areas. So it would just kind of adjusted the schedules for students and just made it happen. So what that kind of forced us to do in a good way is figure out how, as a school community, we're collaborating together and adjusting instruction so that all students can access that core curriculum. And I think it really provided a lot of opportunity for growth, both for special ed teachers to figure out how they're expanding how they're collaborating with the school community, but then also for general education teachers to rethink their practices and make sure that it's inclusive, universally designed. So that's like, it didn't happen immediately and it wasn't perfect right off the bat, but it's been a good start to our journey. So like Todd mentioned, kind of the next step was figuring out how we could fill some of the gaps and provide supports that weren't currently existing. So that's where our Academic Resource Center came from, which to start off, it was kind of establishing this space where students could go, where they could access peer tutoring. But then it became more of this mindset of how are we thinking about support throughout the building? So especially with the paraeducators, is creating this system and this shift in our thinking that all the paraeducators are collaborating with all students, all teachers, to support throughout the building. And that's been a huge shift, is that thinking about it as a team and not just like siloed with individual teachers. We also started collecting resources digitally. So again, expanding access to information so that, for example, if a paraeducator was working with a history teacher, collaborating with them to create a modified test, then we would store that digitally and all students would be able to access that. Well, teachers would have access, but then they can share that with students. And then another thing that we created that I'll share an example of in a little bit is these personalized learning profiles, where special ed teachers were developing more in-depth plans, like support plans for students, including their strengths, their post-secondary goals, strategies that are successful in the classroom. And more recently, we school-wide now have access, one-on-one access to devices for all students. All students have Chromebooks, which thankfully has really helped us out in the last couple of weeks that we've already had that in place. But then that also prompted a lot of teachers to start on their own posting the materials digitally. So we've been using Google Classroom or other learning management systems a lot in the past, which has a lot of our intentions through the Academic Resource Center of creating these digital resources. The goal was that it would eventually become like an automatic thing that happens in the school, And with this shift to more digital learning, that's been a huge boon to special ed, because now everyone has access to these materials. And then also our academic resource center, in terms of the physical space and the services that are provided there, the intention was always that every student in the school could access those services. And now it's shifted to become, we're calling it the Success Center, and it's being staffed by some general education staff that's funded through LAP funding. And I think we'll go in a little more detail about that as well. But in terms of our current class offerings, we're constantly rethinking what co-teaching looks like, where services are provided, what our shift in instruction is looking like. Right now, we are doing block classes in the 9th grade, which is taught between general education teachers and a special ed teacher. And then we have co-teaching in grades 10 through 12 based on student needs, teacher strengths. But then we also do offer some specialized classes to support students who have IEPs. But the intention of that is to support core instruction. So whether those students need some additional like academic interventions, whether it's social communication services, whether it's support for like handling frustrations or coping skills. So the specialized classes are purely to support access to core instruction. And we, as a special ed department, wrote our vision statement this last year. So this is our focus, because this is a constant journey. We're always trying to improve and expand our success as a school team. So right now, our focus has always been that we're implementing high quality IEPs. The biggest shift in that is that those IEPs are not just for that particular student, but in guiding all support and services throughout the building and informing other staff members how to work with those students. Because in our vision, every staff member at Evergreen is working together to provide services. It's not just the responsibility of the special ed teacher or a paraeducator, but that all teachers are responsible for providing services. And of course, our ultimate goal is we want to prepare them for independence and engagement after high school. Because what we've realized is if you keep a student separated in a little secluded classroom, they're not engaging with their peers, they're not engaging with grade level content, that's not preparing them for our world after high school, because our community is inclusive. Everyone is working jobs, working together. So we want them to be as engaged as possible in their school community. So what we found so far, like I said, it's a journey, always looking to improve. Co-teaching, and I noticed a lot of people in the chat wanted to talk about co-teaching, which is great because we've done a lot of that. And it works really well when both teachers are equally invested, when they have time to plan. And that's sometimes when it doesn't work, or when it does, what we hear lots of times is having that shared planning period is really important. And particularly when teachers' individual styles complement each other, so that that you just kind of naturally, teacher pairings work out well together, where they can communicate well together, and not necessarily that they have the same style, but that they can complement each other. By having students in general education classes, we found higher engagement from students on IEPs and achievement on grade level content. So placing those high expectations and teaching them grade level content, it works. And then we've also had that stronger relationship between special ed and gen ed teachers. And like I said, because you just have to. You have to figure it out, and you have to communicate with each other, because as educators, we all want our students to be successful. So we have to work together to make that happen. Some of the challenges that we've seen is that not all co-teaching pairings are going to work, just whether it's experience with the content or different teaching styles, personalities, and that's not a bad thing. It's just something that you have to accept and see as part of the natural flow of teaching, and figure out how can we do this better next year? What other teacher pairings could we try to coordinate? So that's just the nature of co-teaching. And another thing we realized, so in non-co-taught classes, trying to figure out what SDI looks like in those classes has been a challenge. So that's what we're constantly thinking about, is how can we make sure they're getting high quality instruction, same level of support. So just because there's always a limit and time and people, so how are we making sure that all students in the building are getting the same support? And inclusion is also, it's challenging for special ed teachers because we have to manage multiple duties. We have our caseload, we have our co-teaching classes, which means a lot more grading. We still have IEPs to write. We're communicating with paraeducators, with parents. So it's kind of a lot of plates to spin. And then we always get this question when we talk to teachers, but there's, or teachers throughout the state, it's getting that general education teacher engagement and buy-in is challenging. So you think like, well, I have this math teacher that I work with who he's really hard to work with, or he's frustrating. Like that's a realistic situation that happens in a lot of schools. So that's a constant challenge, is figuring out how are we getting buy-in and support from all of our teachers that we're working with. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those flexible teaching models, the co-teaching, and we'll go in more depth about the gateway block, which Mandy is working in right now. And then Dana will talk a little bit from an admin's perspective about how we think about that in terms of master scheduling. So in my 9 years working at Evergreen, I've co-taught in, I did sophomore English, I've done biology, geometry, and algebra 2. And all of those pairings like had different strengths and worked out in different ways, but I really enjoy co-teaching. So here's a picture of me and my friend Shema. We co-taught algebra 2 together for 2 years, which was a really interesting experience. Like you wouldn't think like higher level math classes like that, it was interesting to think like, oh, you have students with IEPs in those classes, but it was a really great opportunity to engage these students in that high level math that they might not otherwise have access to. And this is a good example of how styles complement, because she's really an expert in math. She's a brilliant teacher, knows her standards, knows her like progression of lessons. And I didn't have to come in and feel like I was a math expert, because I could come in more of the like strategy specialist. Like how could we adapt this material and make it accessible to all students? How can I look at a student's IEP goal and figure out where it fits in with the curriculum? So that's when co-teaching really works out, is you can have separate roles and not feel like you both need to be the math teacher all the time or the special ed teacher all the time, but complement each other. But it was really helpful that it wasn't her classroom, it wasn't my classroom. We had an equal partnership in there. We were both teaching different parts of the lesson. We were planning together. So for co-teaching to work, it always looks different for different teachers. There are different models, but it's just figuring out what's best for you and what's best for your class. And I know Mandy's done a good amount of co-teaching as well. Did you want to jump in and share some of your experiences or what's worked for you?
Yeah, I think that you described it great, as it's a true partnership. It's very equal, even though they are the master of their craft. I'm not a history teacher. I am certainly not a math teacher or an English teacher. But I know kids, I know those kids, I know how kids learn. And so we can come together and basically kind of fix this puzzle. Like what is keeping the barrier? Like what is the barriers? What is the kind of like the block that is keeping those kids from getting access to that? And I think the basis for me, from my co-teaching is as long as you have that same passion for students, that same philosophy of infinity chances, I always like to say, is all kids deserve infinity chances. And I notice with gen ed teachers, they're just more reluctant they want to do it. I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. And I think that when you have just, that partnership, that trust, where it's like, well, trust me on this, and I'll trust you on this. it works. Kids find out, kids figure that out. And when you, like I had kids in Shema and Anna's classroom, and just as a case, a case manager perspective was the most benefits I got out of, especially in Algebra 2 class, very high level math. And especially with kids that, could barely multiply, they really had to access accommodations. But between those two women, they were able to get it, be tested, and truly saw growth. And it was probably the most growth I've seen in all of my students having any math classes. And they truly are wonderful. They're a great team. And I work with Shema now, and yeah, it's when the magic's there, it's amazing.
I'm going to jump into just, Mandy kind of alluded to it a little bit, but one of the greatest things about having a special education co-teacher in there is that a lot of times it helps, kids don't necessarily meet a standard all at the same time, right? And sometimes a kid might take a little bit longer to meet a specific standard. And a lot of times people like Mandy or a special education co-teacher help our gen ed teachers to understand that, yeah, the student didn't necessarily meet the standard right now, but having those infinity chances allows for them to meet that standard a little bit later too. And so that's just a really important aspect of co-teaching. And so I guess I'll just go into master schedule here. So, master schedule is a tool to ensure success of inclusive practices, not just for 1 year, but all the way down the line, and really starting to build a tradition of inclusive practices in the building. So at Evergreen, we're constantly trying to increase the capacity of every teacher and help them grow when it comes to modifying instruction so that we can better serve kids. Being able to deliver SDI and modify instruction for individual students is not only good for students with special needs, but it's good for all kids. And so in addition to doing this through co-teaching like I was talking about, this coming year, what we'll be doing is devoting some FTE toward having some of our special education teachers work in the capacity of a coach for those general education teachers. And we kind of see our special education teachers as specialists, where, like Mandy was saying before, our gen ed teachers are kind of content masters. And so we see our special education teachers as masters in being able to modify instruction and create that SDI for kids. And so in order to make that work, we need to make sure that we have some flexibility in special education staff schedules. And like Anna was talking about too, it's really important that we are matching the right people together because that really is an important thing. It's also, when we're talking about creating a master schedule, what we've come to find out is that collaboration is really important, but not just collaboration around classes and content. It's really important to have collaboration time for teachers to talk about specific kids and to kind of drill down at that level. And so you're going to hear about this gateway block that we have, which is basically 3 gen ed teachers, a special education teacher, and an academic support teacher. So 5 teachers across 3 different class periods. And so we're working it out to ensure that all 5 of those adults and teachers have the same collaboration period so that they're able to drill down and talk about specific students. In addition to that, we're making sure that across those 3 content classes, each one of those classes has the same kids in it. So it's truly a block of kids with 5 adults that all see the same kids during the day. We're having to devote different resources in order to make that work, and that's something that's necessary. But what we believe is that being able to drill down and collaborate around the individual student is ultimately going to help them out in their future at the school. Additionally, and kind of like Anna was talking about, we believe in a strengths-based approach and making sure that we put not only our special ed teachers, but also our gen ed teachers in the best place for that person. Not just in content, but also in terms of co-teaching and making sure that the right pairing happens, so that there isn't any kind of conflict. And kind of like Mandy started to allude to a little bit, sometimes it can turn into I'm the teacher and you're the assistant, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so ensuring that we have the right pairing is really important. So that's kind of how we approach our master schedule.
Okay, so now I'm going to go into the gateway block. I was part of the initial team about 3 years ago. It's in our third year. And it really was just a conversation on how we were going to get freshmen to pass classes with the new 24 credit kind of law. So kids in high school, if they previously they had some room to kind of, if they had made a bad semester, they were able to have like a grace kind of landing and still graduate on time. With the 24 credit system, that grace was gone. They have to pass all classes. So it was really a creative way. It was, what could we do to, one, give access to all kids, and two, give them some support to get them through that 4 years. So we have a collaborative teacher team. So we have content teachers. Currently it's 3. Well, no, Danny was right. It's 5. This year was different. It started with just 3 of us, and then so we would give them 3 credits for 2 classes, and I would be the 3rd credit as an elective. The Gateway to College class is embedded into the gen ed classes. So currently we are teaching English and Algebra 1 with the Gateway classes embedded in both classrooms. So it takes a lot. So I will participate in the planning of the actual curriculum, of the gen ed curriculum, but also we strategically place the Gateway lessons throughout those lessons in order to kind of soft land some kids, give those soft lessons, those executive functioning skills maybe they need. We, like, for instance, the first essay we did in the beginning of the year, I would have 9th graders that, a paragraph was going to be a huge benefit for them. And we wanted them to push them and write a 5-paragraph essay. So we did a Gateway lesson on just sentence structure, how to expand your thinking. We worked in teams. Just that one lesson, and then the next day we went on to it, and the kids weren't so afraid anymore. When we plan lessons, everything is who can access it. That's our first question when we plan lessons. Who is it accessing? Who can do it? And all kids can do it. If they can't, then we need to maneuver something that is not working. The Gateway block the curriculum is basically based on the kids we have and what's going on at the time. I have taught lessons, about just being nice to each other as a community, and there's some classes where I don't have to do that because that community-based learning has already been embedded in our classes. We really do have a philosophy as people first, then content. So that first 2 to 3 weeks of the school year really just is getting to know each other. It's building that trust. It's building that community. Kids come from a very structured, very like pick up your pencils, middle school experience, and they come here, and like Danny always, I like what he says is, it's kind of rough that 9th graders have the same freedoms as a 12th grader. And so we try to really create that hedge around them where this is their home, their starting off point, and then we can release them. I'm a huge relationship builder. I feel like I get my content and my next directions from the kids. So like if I have kids that, especially kids on an IEP that have been used to not getting it, not understanding curriculum, and then also not trusting that teacher because they don't understand, so they're not going to produce. So it's really just getting between, and they're puzzles. It's really finding that puzzle piece between the kids, building on it, and then having that freedom to kind of modify, like, well, start here, then here, then here. And like Yanni said, it's that progression of learning, and it's everyone starts different. So as long as they can produce this, they can do this. It is really, for grading purposes, they just kind of flourished, and we noticed that the gateway block, their classes, they knew our grading purposes, they knew all those things. And then what we really had to focus on was the other classes that they weren't in. So the gateway block really does become like an all access pass. We really focus on, so I noticed your physics class is not doing well, how can I help? And so we become a one-stop shop for gaining those classes and gaining that growth in everything the kids do. We do a lot of data tracking. A lot of our meetings we will just put up the grade book and notice who scored what's the next step. And it's kind of like, yes, we still have to go on and that teacher has to teach that lesson, but what can I do to supplant something, or could we switch something? Obviously, all kids bombed this. Let's do something else. So we really can plan on the fly as well as long-term plan together. And that time together is very valuable. And everyone has is a part of the problem, is a part of the puzzle, and they're able to we're able to come together and really be a team. And the kids really like that too. I think the biggest compliment I've ever received from a student was when they told me, I could tell that you guys are friends. And so that was really great, where we kind of looked at each other and went, I guess we are friends. So the kids really get that. And we really, every class has a personality, and it's really nice to see all the different personalities and how they grow throughout the year. The picture shown is just I kind of took over. My co-manager had a baby, and so I took over. We didn't have a sub. I will take over. And so this was just a little thing I had to get the kids' grades up, where we took all the missing assignments. The kids worked in groups, and they had to do that assignment for the whole class, and then they had to teach it. So that's Jordan teaching the kids that particular assignment, because they were experts at that assignment. So that's kind of a fun way for kids that, if they're good at this, but they need to work on this, they can do, they're teaching each other how to do it. It's not just me on a whiteboard or on a dot cam telling them how to do things. I think next slide. So this video is my students. I have former students, and you're gonna see three. Todd, Anna. It's Jordan, Lila, and Katie. Lila, just a little quick background on the kids. Lila came to me extremely just shy, barely could talk. But then just noticing her, that kids really respected her, and when she talked, kids listened. So we kind of pushed her more towards a leadership role. She's now the Honor Society Vice President, which is amazing. Jordan was that kid that I just want to, whatever I can do to get kicked out, cool. and now he really is proud of his growth. He's engaged in his learning. Katie too, she was a wallflower. If you didn't talk to her, that was the best day of her life. And she is now a voice in her classroom. She knows that she has things to say, and people should listen. So go ahead, Anna. We're just going to show you just a snippet of their experience.
The block helped my transition into high school by like it was like a new start, like a new area, and like I was nervous like most freshmen would be. It's like just knowing, like having that sense of comfort that like those teachers are gonna be there for you and not gonna let you fail. It's nice.
The people in there, they're really motivating. So like even if you can't do it, they're not gonna rush you. It's like, oh, you have to finish this. No, they're gonna sit down and take their time with you and actually work through it.
see, coming out of middle school into high school, block really helped in a way because I came from like really low key kind of work to you need to get your work done and it needs to be perfect, kind of. But I think once I had help, I think it kind of helped me through that.
When I first went into that class, I was like kind of weirded out because we're in a circle and we were like having a confession about what we want to do in that class. And I thought it was like an English class at first, but when we like transitioned to like college and like talking about careers that we want to go in, that's when I noticed like, oh, this is for real. Like this is actually what high school life is about.
Yeah, it set me off right, like in my high school career, like gave me a nice start, and just like it just boosted me from the jump, like knowing that I know I can do this, even if I drop down the hole and get a couple missing assignments or something, like I can easily catch back up by myself.
And it helped me out a lot because it kind of made me see the things I can do, and it gave me the leadership role that I didn't know I had. It gave me a voice that I didn't know I could like speak about it. It just gave me the power and the will to try things new out of my comfort zone. And I think that's a good part of it.
I think I do have more confidence in asking my teacher. Yeah.
They were like my base of high school, so like I knew how to like, you know, go about like my missing assignments and stuff like that. So it's easier to catch up with my work and stuff because I had them to teach me. I feel like some of the support that I got from the block that others didn't was just like, you know, like all teachers care about you, but there was like, you had 3 specific teachers that you knew like would be there for you with any assignment you needed help with. Like even outside of the classes that they taught, like they could help you with them and get your grades up when you needed them.
I think that the students in there kind of had a bond near the end because they all kind of noticed that, oh, we're here for the same thing, is that graduation. Like we wanted that, and we kind of had a strong bond with the teachers and the students because in that class, I kind of recognized that instead of students like telling each other like, oh, I think you should do this, instead of that, they're helping each other. When I went to sophomore year, I took more honors classes because it kind of gave me the confidence and the outlook that I can achieve higher grades if I put my mind, my effort, and my time into it.
It helped me a lot. I got my grades up. My motivation was way better after, you know, I had the block.
Looking back, I think the block impacted myself in many ways. I think one of the things, like it changed like my view, like my perspective of going to school. Cause like before, like school, you know, like no one really enjoys going. But like having them, it's like we had like a teacher connection, but it's also like outside of class, like, you know, we're close enough to, you know, so like just being there, like enjoying, like them making it interesting and like something to enjoy instead of just work. You know, you get to have some fun in between it. So I just kind of enjoy coming to school every day
now. Somebody asked, I just want to go really quickly, someone asked about what I saw, like any kind of growth. I would say the passing rate for all of their classes is above 80% for every year. I think one year we slipped to 79, but the kids really do, once they buy in, they really do kind of use the resources accurately. And so, you know, we've had some really good success with their passing.
And I also want to say that we looked at some of the behavior data too, and we see a lot of behavior incidents freshman year, but for the students that were in the block the last couple years, those were lower, which I think speaks to they know that they have that connection and there's a lot less acting out that happens that first year.
Also, I'll also jump in here, you know, regarding SEL, the block classes are where our students are really developing the student to teacher relationships the most. You know, like every school, we have behavior issues with students not going to some classes. Well, a lot of the students that are involved in the block classes will actually try to go back to their block class when they don't have it. For the relationship piece of the teachers that are there, Mandy's a big part of that, but that's a big part of the success of this as well, is just the relationship piece.
I wanted to jump in really quick and talk about the impact that block has on the whole building. Because of the master schedule, the block kids, they have those classes together, so then they often take many of the same classes after that together. And so a lot of our block kids this year had Spanish, and we're struggling in that. And so Mandy was able to build a relationship with the Spanish teacher and kind of bring her in to help think about strategies and grading practices and assessments that could help the kids be successful. So the reach of the block is more than just that space as well.
And talk about not knowing your content. But yeah, and she was more than happy to join. And that's what I've learned, that if you just ask, teachers will join. They want to be part of something.
Awesome. So now we'll transition to how we view the role of the special education teacher. So we have a really clear vision. We view special education teachers as strategy specialists. They have the knowledge and the training about how to, like, what are effective practices to help learners achieve the learning goals and how to assess and adjust. And so we expect them to be flexible problem solvers, to effectively navigate those like coaching stances. Mentor stances is another term that sometimes people use. But we see sometimes they have to determine if they need to be like a consultant partner or a co-learning their peers in the building. So like as a consultative partner, they might be providing resources or offering like a menu of options to consider, demonstrating lessons, modeling lessons, highlighting research to kind of push that change and that growth. As a co-learning partner, the special ed teacher might be exploring or brainstorming like different ideas and co-planning. That involves the co-teaching, doing a lesson study, really digging in together and getting smarter with the teacher together. As a reflective partner, the SPED teacher, is trying to surface the perceptions and issues and concerns, and then support the teacher in figuring out how to navigate that. So as Anna talked about, like they do have their roles in writing IEPs and they do have their caseloads, but it's like a deeper role that they have within our building of helping us all become smarter. Anna, if you want to go on to thinking deeper with the communication with all staff.
Yeah, that's on the next slide, I think. So one of the main things, because obviously as a special ed teacher, I feel like it's a big shift. As a special ed teacher, you really want to, like, you feel like, oh, I'm responsible for all these students, all their progress and goals. I want to have a lot of control, but that's part of this inclusion models is you have to accept that you're going to release that control and rely on your colleagues to take up some of that work. So a big part of that is making sure that there's clear communication between all staff members, and especially how communicating with gen ed teachers and paras who might be providing a lot of those services when you're not physically in the room. So this is one artifact that we'll have, that I'm sharing, these digital learning profiles that we created. We use IEP Online, which if you go and print like an IEP at a glance, it's got their goals, it's got their services, accommodations, which to share that with a gen ed teacher, it might not always give the full picture of how to support a student. So we started using these learning profiles where we do share the goals, we share their accommodations, but it's going more in depth. So this is one that I adapted from an actual student that I'm working with that talks about like, you know, what he doesn't have internet at home. That's kind of an important thing to share, but that like, what is he interested in? What clubs is he connected with? What does he want to do after high school? And then the area below, it goes in specifically like this student really struggles with handwriting and spelling, and just written production is a big challenge. So I provide like, always provide access to a computer, teach him how to use these different tools. So it's a lot more of a communication tool with teachers to say, this is what I know works with this student and what you should do in your classroom. But what's really important about these documents is it's not just something that we print out and share once, it's a living document on Google Drive so that we can update it. And I even have the students sit down with me and help me update it every year to figure out what they want their teachers to know about them. Although it's because there's some confidential information in there, this is just for communication between teachers. And then the biggest thing that we use this for is our paraeducators have access to this, and they'll record comments on the bottom, like, here's what Sammy did in English class today. He did a really good job on this. I saw him use these tools, and it's a way for them to be collecting data, especially on like behavior or progress in the classroom, but then also just a general way of making sure that we're all on the same page about this student. So another big communication strategy that we've used, like I said, like we have to expect that all of our colleagues are supporting students, is our shifting and paraeducator training. So when we created the academic center and had all of our paraeducators working together as one team rather than just in programs or with specific teachers, we really increased our training, because these paraeducators, when there can't be a co-teacher in the classroom, they're really on the front line of working with gen ed teachers, working with students. And in lots of times, depending on the strengths of the paraeducator, they almost become like a co-teacher. Their relationship with the teacher is really important. So in order to do that and have that be a successful strategy, we've had to increase the capacity of our paras. So we have weekly meetings, we check in, we'll discuss maybe some strategies. We do like student talks where we'll mention a particular student and collaborate as a team to think about new strategies that might work with them. In the beginning of the year, we have a training to just kind of get everyone on board, talk about big picture stuff, the role of the paraeducator. And then there's also job embedded training with different SPED teachers. So just for example, this little picture on here, I did a training just recently about helping versus nudging with paraeducators. So what's the difference between just helping a student get their work done versus nudging them to grow as learners and use strategies, which is really hard for a lot of paraeducators because they want their students to be successful. They just want them to get it done and pass their classes. But we're thinking about long-term, how do we encourage that productive struggle, especially in these classes. So, and we've seen a lot of success with that, and our gen ed teachers really appreciate having paraeducators in their classroom to support them and support students. So then our kind of final big topic that we want to talk about is this idea of creating a culture within our school that like inclusion isn't just the job of special ed teachers, or it's not the job of admin, but that we're all involved in this. The students are involved, all teachers are involved, parents are involved. So we'll talk a little bit about how we're shifting towards student ownership of IEPs, and then our integrated support, which is one of our specialized classes, how that's shifting. And then we'll talk about our unified sports program a little bit. So Mandy, do you want to talk a little bit about how you've done conferencing with students?
Yes. So this is basically how to start that student-led IEP. This is what I do with all kids that are failing. They have either a D or an F in the gateway block. And it's just a quick, table I just made on a Google Doc, and I went through all that kids' grades, and then the kid and I meet together. We discuss their point of view, what's going on, what is the problem, what do they see is impacting them. Is it just a relationship with a teacher? Is it a lack of resources? Is it just plain, being a kid and not wanting to do, work? Then a parent is contacted, and then the parent, picks the date, the time, and then I kind of wrangle the teachers. It's an email just going, hey, send me something and be here at this meeting. And I noticed that if we don't call it an IEP meeting, we call it just like the parent meeting, teachers will come. And this particular meeting, this artifact was, it was like 4 weeks to the semester, and this was his 9th grade year. He has been, we've been talking about in the Gateway block about the importance of passing your classes, about credits, and about credit recovery. And so this was really, he came to me one day and said, what do I do? I need help. So one side was, this is what he's currently doing. And then the other side was, this is what he needs to do this is the recipe he needs to do in order to get this grade. So it becomes a contract plan plus a data set all in one. So I took a picture of this, the parent got this, and then I got to send this to all the teachers as a kind of, here you go, this is your contract. And then I just wrote the dates for the kid, like, okay, I'll take it by the 20, like if we do grades on the 25th, teachers will go, all right, you can turn it on the 25th or the 24th. So, and then this is what he did. And I will say, after this meeting, he got everything done but wood tech. Wood tech was just a little rough for him, and that's okay. Then we make a plan B for next time.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about one of our specialized classes that we offer for some students with IEPs. And again, it's not automatic that all students get this class. It's just based on their IEP and what their specific service needs are. But this is one class, one period a day. It's an elective class that focuses on independent skills, academics as well, but our big focus is on this executive functioning and planning for the future. So especially our students that might not have a very strong transition plan, or they're not sure what their life is going to look like after high school. This is a good class where we're building those plans. So what I've done with my students in this class in the past, and it's kind of confusing because it's also called a learning profile, but we have the teacher learning profiles that I talked about earlier, but this is a project that I had my students create where they made their own learning profile to share with their teachers, where they talked about their post-secondary goals, talked about their values. We did a lot of activities and surveys to figure out what they're good at, who they are as a learner, but then what's really important for them to understand what they need, and that's not a weakness, that it's everyone learns differently, but that if they know what they need and how to ask for different accommodations, then that can be a real strength. So my students created these plans, shared them with their gen ed teachers, and on the bottom part, we also took all their accommodations directly from IEP Online, which sometimes are teacher speaky or kind of wordy, and then the students interpreted those accommodations into what that means specifically for them and how they would use that in the classroom. So this is just one example of how to get students engaged with their IEP, with their needs, and that it's not we're all different learners, and that's not a bad thing, but just being able to ask for it really makes you more engaged in your learning. And I wanted to mention this too. Somebody asked about student-led IEP meetings, and that's definitely a goal. And we've seen a lot of progress in when a student is engaging with these sort of activities, thinking about their IEP, thinking about what they need, then they have a lot more voice in that IEP meeting. So we're working towards student-led IEPs, but we've definitely seen a lot more student engagement where they're not afraid to even come to their IEP meeting anymore. It used to be this scary thing, oh, I don't want to go, everyone's going to talk about me, but they get to share with their teachers and their parents what they're doing. So that's definitely been a big area of progress for us. So
another way that Evergreen and other high schools in this district bridged that inclusive culture and built upon those student relationships was 6 years ago, the superintendent of the school district and the executive director, Jay Buno, came to the special ed admin team and asked how we could get unified sports in this district. And from there, it took a great team effort to get that in place. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of things that, a lot of rewarding moments that we get as educators on a daily basis. And when you're seeing a student that you've worked on as a team to try to help build a plan and help that student make progress, and now you see them on a basketball court take a shot and a crowd just cheering for that person, and on that student's face it just lights up, and it's just such a rewarding moment to see that other people cheering for that same kid that you and the staff have for years been working with to engage with school. And so that is rewarding as far as educators go, but what outcomes we have seen since embedding unified sports in the district was this idea that that students are starting to build relationships and deeper relationships with their peers. And from there, last year, Evergreen High School had kind of a lunch buddy club. And this year they were able to include Best Buddies organization as part of what they do to also promote those meaningful relationships. And so that way peer-to-peer relationship can occur by having weekly contacts and these monthly events that happen and really just continue to build on that culture at the school. And another thing that is really great is when you go to an assembly, you see that culture just really be part of what the school does, and it's amazing to see that in action.
Awesome. One thing that we have learned along the way is that all students benefit from the changes and the systems and structures that we have put in place. So scaling up, we have taken basically the idea of increased use of data that we see often in SPED, and we are implementing it in other ways around our building. So we are investing highly in our 9th grade year and trying to make sure that that transition is successful. So a couple more programs that have come out of this are a bridge team, which is a team that's specifically dedicated to facilitating tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 support for our incoming freshman students. So we have a really close relationship to one of our feeder schools that's literally right next to our building. So we can get over there really quickly and join for lunch and have our leadership students pass out swag or whatever. So that's definitely a focus. We have student success team meetings by grade level, which are targeted meetings looking at data to monitor student success and make interventions and adjustments. We have two tier 2 specialists, which are 2 certified teachers that monitor behavior, attendance, and grade data, a bag report basically, and target those kids in the yellow zone to make sure that they're not slipping, that we can push them, make sure they don't get into the red zone and we can keep them in the yellow zone, or that we can help push them into the green zone. We have a program that Mandy runs, which is called the Freshman Cafe. So every 6 weeks after a grading period, 9th grade students get a Plainsman report, which is their behavior, attendance, and grade data. And then they meet with a mentor and talk about their progress, what's going on, using data to kind of be that third point in that conversation. And then lastly, which we briefly talked about, were the academic coaches who are in the Success Center and help facilitate that tutoring and coaching to help kids who weren't in that block understand, like, you can go to your teacher and talk about missing assignments, and let's role play that, for example, among many other executive functioning skills.
I'll jump into with the focus on ninth grade. All the data talks about success in ninth grade equals success through high school, and so beyond those programs, if you go back one slide there, Todd, beyond all of those things, it really is. It's integrated support for every ninth grader and throughout the school. But one of the most important parts, and Mandy alluded to this earlier too, is that it's a little bit of a philosophical change school-wide. When kids go from 8th grade to 9th grade, all of a sudden they get to high school, and just in our own heads as adults, we treat them all the same, 9th grade through 12th grade. Have the same level of expectations for them, and it's difficult. That transition is difficult from 8th grade to 9th grade, and so part of that bridge team, part of that student support team, part of those Tier 2 specialists, like Freshman Cafe, all of that is geared toward supporting kids with as much support as we can throw at them. We try to really make sure that our 9th grade classes, all of our classes who teach 9th graders, look a lot more like 8th grade classes than they do like 12th grade classes. And so part of that connection to the middle school that Andrea was talking about with the bridge team is also geared toward figuring out a way to help those kids survive really in that first semester of high school as they transition from middle school students to high school students, because I'm sure you agree with me that they don't become high school students until maybe a few weeks from now in May. So trying to make that transition a little bit easier and slower for them is instrumental in ensuring their success.
Okay, so just so you're aware, like, we are continuously trying to improve and get smarter about the work that we do. So just so you can see sort of our thinking and where we're going next, we are refining the block. So we are investing in an extra prep period for each of the block teachers. So they'll have time to work collaboratively for one period, and then they'll have their own prep period to get the planning and the work done during that other one. So during that collaborative prep period, they're also expected to do some PD, some book studies, work with our instructional coach, do data kid talks. But that makes it so they have that sacred time every day to make sure that work gets done. Another thing that we're doing is a inclusion leadership team that Anna's leading, where we are trying to get guidance about our next steps from a whole bunch of stakeholders. Anna, do you want to talk any more about that?
Yeah, so that was kind of our goal for this period of time right now. If we were actually still in the building and living our normal lives, we put out a request for all staff in the building, including gen ed teachers, counselors, admin, to participate in this inclusion leadership team, because I think for us to really move to the next level and see a lot more growth is to take the ownership on inclusion and have everyone really accept that and take that responsibility. So I want to see our gen ed teachers thinking about what does this look like for students with IEPs throughout the building? How can we teach each other how to use successful strategies? And we do have a really great core group of gen ed teachers who are all on board. They love collaboration. They love developing these strategies. And I want them to take some leadership and share that with everybody else too. So we're doing this kind of digitally right now and coming up with goals and our vision that we're going to push out in the beginning of the year when we get back to work.
And then our last sort of new venture that we're going to take is having some dedicated SDI coaches. So instead of co-teaching where they're connected and kind of they have to stay in that classroom with that one teacher, they will have a flexible schedule where they can work with several teachers and determine where's going to be the best use of their time for this week or this month, or where's the greatest need. We know that professionals learn best when they have repeated opportunities to practice those essential components of effective performance. And then they can receive feedback, right? And then make a change and try again. And that's how real deep learning happens. So we're trying to figure out models about how to implement that. We also, like, part of their other job will be like implementation of the various tools we have available, like Snap and Read and Co-Writer, Cami, other speech to text tools like Co-Creator and Newsella. So that will be part of their role as well. And really, we just want the final takeaway to be invest in your people, build on their capacities, and utilize their strengths. I think an amazing thing about Evergreen is we have a culture of risk-taking and trying new things. And when you utilize the passion and the strengths that people have, amazing things happen, like from the kids you saw in the video with Mandy and Anna's work.
Well, thank you. A tremendous thank you to the Evergreen team for sharing your journey. We've included their contact information here, and we'll also give you information about places you can access the presentation and the resources you heard about today in the next couple of slides. So let's do a quick share in the chat. What are the systems, culture, and leadership practices you heard about today that support inclusive schools? And what are some initial steps you can take back to your school? Hear about the gateway block, co-teaching. Great, yeah, a lot about the gateway block. I saw lots of questions around the gateway block throughout the presentation. The Evergreen team did a great job answering those questions. Trust, the bridge teams, the paraeducator support, taking risks and growing together, all students gen ed, the flexible teaching and co-teaching with time to co-plan, student advocacy, student involvement, SDI coaches. These are all excellent. Thank you for sharing. We're going to take a little bit of time, so we're getting close to the end, to answer some of the questions that came up during the Q&A. I know quite a few of them were already answered, but here's one for the Evergreen team. Were there any specific changes in infrastructure, policies, or procedures, including at the school board level, that you believe will keep this going? So this is after administrative leadership changes or established educators move on or retire. What are some of those core things?
I can address that. Our board has a significant emphasis on equity and access for all students, and you see it entwined in all of their policies and expectations. As Danny may have mentioned when he started, he's not the principal that was at Evergreen High School that started this all. And since this all started, we've had 3 different superintendents. So I'd say that the beliefs of the system, starting with the board, is hugely important in this. And then I think the most important thing, and I can't say this enough, is ensuring you have staff who fundamentally believes in this at the core of what they do. And as you heard from every one of them that spoke, that's definitely the case. I can't say enough how this wouldn't have gotten to the place it is without the people who we have in the buildings doing it every single day, because it's hard work. But as far as the system goes, the board is hugely important. And if you were to look at Evergreen's policies, you would see an expectation that all students are or have opportunities for instruction in these manner, or I'm sorry, in this way. So I've lost my train of thought. But.
Great, thank you, Jay. One more question before we move on. It looks like we've had a lot of questions already answered, so nice job, Evergreen team. But how did you increase staff buy-in when you're making these shifts and changes to school culture?
I'll speak to that a little bit. I think for most teachers, the idea of like, oh, I'm gonna have like somebody that I can collaborate with, like high school can be very isolating where you're stuck in your own classroom. So for a lot of teachers to say, I can collaborate with this person in my room, or I can have somebody to help me, that's buy-in in itself, that they know that they have a team that they're working with. And then there's also this next level of teachers who might want to buy in, but there's a lot of fear or uncertainty because they don't feel confident and they don't feel like they have the skills to work with these students. So then that's, you know, providing that, teaching them those skills or providing that PD. And even like through co-teaching, that is a form of PD where I've been in some co-teaching partnerships that after we work together, that teacher then feels confident to work with all students because of the skills she's learned. And then it's really like for those kind of resistant teachers, and there's going to be a small percentage of those where like, I don't want these kids, teachers that say, I don't want these kids in my class. That's really, it's about those relationships where you teach them what's possible and rethink the idea of what curriculum is supposed to look like or what a standards look like. And the idea that not all students are going to be learning at the same rate. They have different goals after high school. So that's a big, trying to shift the culture in our school. Anyone else want to add anything to that?
It's also, I'll jump in too. It's also some really intentional and intentionally timed conversations. There's a little bit of seed planting that happens at first, especially with those maybe more reluctant teachers at first. And then the other part of it is, well, I guess two other parts. One is communicating the successes is really important too, so that, you know, everybody starts to hear how successful either the program is or the how successful co-teaching has gone or whatever it is. And then also using the strengths of the teachers who are involved in it to help guide those who don't necessarily have that strength, and starting small, maybe with one co-taught class, or just starting with you know, like we're going to start doing with having a special education coach that's going to help teachers to better modify or deliver SDI, whether there's a co-teacher in there or not. So you know, I think a lot of it is just intentional timing and intentional conversations too.
Great, thank you, Danny, and thanks, Anna. So we're running a little over time, so we're going to close up. I know there are still a few questions. We'll be monitoring those in the chat and in the Q&A section, and we'll be kind of reviewing those, and we'll do our best to get back to you with answers. But, you know, to learn more about the Demonstration Sites Project and OSPI's Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project, please visit these websites, or feel free to email us at uwdemosites@uw.edu. We'll be posting a recording of this webinar along with a folder of the resources and artifacts presented today on our website before the end of the month. We would love to get feedback about our session today. Please take a minute to provide us with feedback that we can use to effectively share demonstration sites journeys in webinar format in the future. This survey is anonymous, and Molly will send clock hour forms to those who are in attendance after the webinar today. Finally, I want to give a thank you to OSPI and CSTEP for their partnership in this project. We're going to go back a bit and do a collaborative activity with the group before we close, just to give Evergreen that real-time feedback, and so they can see some of what you're thinking about today as you leave our session. So I'm going to hand it over to Katie to lead us through this collaborative activity.
All right, we are going to do, oh, some of you guys are already on it. So if you could text UW Herring Center to 333. So UW Herring Center is the message, and the recipient is 22333. We would love for you to let us know in one word, what are the systems, culture, and or leadership practices you heard about today that support inclusive schools? And as you do this, something that's really neat is the words that are bigger. It means that multiple people have written those down.
So we see collaboration is a big one, relationships, co-teaching. I see someone put in the chat unity. Oh, we see honesty coming up. Gen Ed input. Collaboration keeps getting bigger. I see master schedule. Great, thank you. As you guys continue filling out those one word on our word cloud, I want to take this opportunity to thank OSPI and CSEP for their partnership in this project. And of course, a huge thanks to Evergreen High School for your inspiring work. And thanks to all of you for joining us today to learn more about inclusionary practices and for envisioning how you might take some of what you learned today and apply it to your schools. We hope you will join us in future webinars, and that when our doors open again, you will take advantage in person of visiting our Washington State demonstration sites.
All right, Evergreen team, as we finish this, I'll take a screenshot of this so that we can save some of the leadership practices and systems and culture that people shared today on this cloud.
Great, and for those of you still online, our attendees, please do take the time to complete the evaluation. The feedback is very valuable to us. So thank you so much. Thanks, Katie.